At 5:30 a.m., my phone vibrated across the nightstand. I had fallen asleep less than an hour earlier after a double shift at Mercy General. My body was still humming with fluorescent light and IV alarms. I almost ignored it. But it was Mrs. Henley from next door. She never called unless something was wrong. Claire. Her voice was careful, the way people speak around fragile objects. I don't want to alarm you, but your grandmother is sitting on your front steps. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming. My grandmother. I repeated, sitting up. That's not possible. I'm looking at her, she said gently. She has a small suitcase. The air left my lungs slowly, like someone had opened a valve. I was 20 minutes away at my apartment near the hospital. My house, technically my house, was 10 minutes from my parents' place in suburban Columbus. I'd kept it after refinancing, even though I mostly stayed closer to work. I drove back in my scrubs, heart steady but hollow. Grandma Evelyn was exactly where Mrs. Henley said she would be. Cardigan buttoned wrong. Hairpin neatly. A navy suitcase beside her like she was waiting for a ride to the airport. She wasn't confused. She wasn't crying. She just looked small. All good, she said when she saw me. I wasn't sure if you were home. I crouched in front of her. Grandma, why are you here? She hesitated. The kind of pause that holds someone else's words inside it. Your mother said this would be easier. Just for a little while. Easier. The word pressed against my ribs. I unlocked the door and brought her inside. The house smelled like closed windows and lemon cleaner. I hadn't expected guests. I hadn't expected this. In the kitchen. I poured her tea while my phone buzzed again. Mom, I let it ring once more before answering. Claire, honey, she said brightly, as if we were discussing brunch plans. We meant to call you last night, but it was chaos here. What happened? Well, Daniel and Marissa needed to move in sooner than we thought. The baby's room. There just wasn't enough space. You understand. Understand. My younger brother Daniel had always needed understanding. When he dropped out of community college. When he cycled through jobs. When Marissa decided she didn't want to work after the baby. I had been the stable one. The mortgage at 24. The credit score. The one who didn't need as much help. You dropped Grandma off on my porch at 5 in the morning. I said, keeping my voice even. She didn't want to fuss. Mom replied quickly. And you have the extra bedroom. You're hardly there. There it was, you're hardly there, as if vacancy meant availability. As if ownership meant communal access. Did you bring her medication list? I asked. Silence. Claire, don't make this into something it's not. Did you coordinate with her primary care physician? Or transfer her pharmacy prescriptions? Another pause. Longer thought we'd sort that out later. Grandma sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, pretending not to listen. I ended the call without raising my voice. I've worked long enough as a nurse to recognize neglect when I see it. Not malicious. Not dramatic. Just careless and convenient. I made 2 calls that morning. The first was to Grandma's doctor's office. The second was to Franklin County Adult Protective Services. Not because I wanted my parents punished. Because someone had transported an 82-year-old woman with hypertension and early-stage dementia without medical planning or consent. Because temporary arrangements have a way of becoming permanent when no one documents them. The caseworker arrived that afternoon. Her name was Ms. Alvarez. Navy blazer. Calm, she asked my grandmother questions gently but clearly. Who decided she would move? Did she feel she had a choice? Did she want to stay? Grandma answered carefully. She didn't want to cause trouble, but she admitted she hadn't known the timing. She'd been told they were renovating her room. Miss Alvarez then asked me for documentation. Property records. Financial contribution plans. My mother called 3 times while the caseworker was still in my living room. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally answered, she sounded different. What have you done? She asked quietly. I've made sure Grandma is protected. I said, you called the government on us. I called because she deserves proper coordination. If she's living here, we're doing it legally. There was anger in her breathing. But also something else, realization. Daniel texted next. Accusations. Words like dramatic and overreaction. Marissa sent a longer message about how stressed they were. I didn't reply. Instead, I met with an elder law attorney the following week. Power of attorney paperwork. Financial responsibility agreements. Shared care planning, if grandma stayed with me and I was willing. My parents would contribute monthly to her expenses. Medical decisions would be documented. No more informal handoffs, the shift wasn't loud. There was no family meeting with shouting and tears. There were email signatures, bank transfers, process replaced assumption. 2 weeks later, my parents came over in the early evening. Not to argue, to sign. Dad avoided my eyes at first. Mom looked tired. You could have just talked to us, she said softly. I have been talking, I replied. For years. The room held that sentence like a fragile plate. Grandma watched from the recliner, cardigan folded neatly in her lap. No one apologized, but they signed. Months passed. Grandma settled into the rhythm of my house. Morning crossword, afternoon television. A small garden patch by the fence. Some evenings we'd sit at the kitchen table going through old photo albums. She'd tell me stories about my grandfather's hardware store. About ration books and school dances in 1958. There was tenderness in those moments. And there was something else too, a quiet line drawn. My parents stopped assuming I would host every holiday. They called before sending packages to my address. They transferred money on the first of every month without reminders. Daniel's family stayed with them. The house grew louder there. Ours grew steadier. One night, after locking the front door, I stood in the hallway longer than necessary. The house felt different. Not burdened. Defined. I hadn't won anything. I hadn't punished anyone. But I had chosen to care for my grandmother because I wanted to. Not because it was assigned to me in the dark before sunrise. Chosen to require structure where there had only been expectation. Upstairs, Grandma's bedroom light clicked off. I turned off the hallway lamp and walked to my room. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like overflow. It felt like mine.